begin by saying it's a great pleasure to follow the Noble Lord Randall of Uxbridge, a great champion of nature, and also to be following the two previous Noble Lords who said many things with which I can agree, particularly the Noble Lords Randall and Greaves, who were reflecting on disappointment, widespread disappointment, that the amendments to the agriculture bill that would have protected people who live in close proximity to particularly agricultural land didn't ultimately make it through the system. And as both Noble Lords said, we can but try again in the Environment Bill. I am going to pick up something the Noble Lord the Minister said in his introduction, referring to continued high levels of protection. And I think the practical reality, whether we're talking about pesticides or POPs, persistent organic pollutants, we have a poisoned country, a poisoned landscape, and indeed a poisoned planet. And to start in any debate, I think it's important to acknowledge that we have utterly failed in the past, and that what we're doing today is bringing forward things which are regulations that are perhaps much better than those, say, in the United States and in other regimes, but that even the EU regulations that we're transferring across are still not nearly strong enough. I do have a couple of specific detailed questions, and like others, I am relying here rather heavily on the work of the of Client Earth, and particularly a question regarding to Regulation 3(8). Which this regulation removes the wording which would permit the appropriate authority to make regulations in respect to the official controls on production, packaging, labelling, storage, transport, marketing, formulation, parallel trade, and the use of plant protection products, and particularly B, the collection information on reporting on suspected poisonings. And a direct question to the Noble Lord the Minister, either now or in the future, that apparent loss of collection and reporting on suspected poisonings is obviously a very deeply worrying loss. It would be interesting to hear why that's happened and how it might be fixed. I also refer to wording in relating to the health and hazards and risk of pesticides in the new EU regulation number 65/207 at Article 24 regarding the protection from pesticides and the risk of poisoning. I'd also like to refer to the issue of chronic poisoning. Very often we can hope or would expect that where there's an acute case, there will be reporting. It's the kind of thing that we might expect our media very much to pick up on. But where we have chronic poisoning, it develops over a number of period of years, such as operators, agricultural workers, or indeed people living close to pesticide application areas, the issue that the amendment to the Agriculture Bill was trying to address. We've seen reports going back to 1987 saying there was inadequate monitoring happening in the UK, and yet we still haven't seen any change in policy, any real move to deal with that chronic situation. And finally, I want to get to some broader points, which build on very much what the Noble Lord Randall was just saying, noting that the sale of pesticides in the UK each year is worth 627 million, and around the world, nearly $60 billion. This is obviously a big, powerful, vested interest. And as the Noble Lord said, that vested interest wants to protect its sales. Yet I would very much agree with the Noble Lord, Lord Barclay, speaking earlier, saying we want and need to move towards a world using no pesticides. And I think my response to his concerns about neonicotinoids and the impact of their withdrawal on rapeseed growing in the UK would be that we have to be growing a very diverse range of crops, and crops that are suited to our conditions. And it was always very clear. I've stood in a field in Lincolnshire with a star rapeseed grower and discussed the difficulties of growing rapeseed in the UK, that rapeseed has never been a crop particularly suited to UK conditions. So we need to move to a different kind of approach, an approach that the government has focused on in terms of talking about, at least, and including to some degree in the Agriculture Bill, agroecology. And if we are going to work with nature to use the power, the force, the richness of healthy soils, the richness of the interactions of integrated pest management, of moving in that direction. That's the way that we need to go. And indeed, I'd note that perhaps a further question for the Noble Lord the Minister, both of the EU directives that we're transferring across here do make quite a focus on the need to move towards pest management systems that don't rely on pesticides, and what the government is doing to take further steps in that direction. So I think, to conclude, we've been through so many cycles from DDT onwards, of a pesticide being discovered, being promoted as the new wonder chemical, perfectly safe, perfectly wonderful, solves all our problems. And usually a couple of decades later, we're banning it. It's been a disaster. And I would say that this is a cycle that we desperately need to stop.